My question to you is that in the Liminal Order, we've been studying fourth generation warfare quite a bit, and because we think it's a valuable model to understand the world that we live in. And one of the key components that we've discovered is that the light infantry is the key to fighting a fourth generation war. And you're telling me about how your training has set you up to go behind enemy lines, to interact with the locals, to do all kinds of stuff that is, I think, in the same vein as 4G, as we learned it reading Boyd and Lind and their experiences in Iraq. To what extent is that training sort of informing your idea of how the military should work today in the United States? Like, what lessons did you take from Iraq? For example, in the book, they discovered, that if you just, smash and level, whole towns, you end up with a worse situation than you had in the first place. You've built all kinds of new insurgents, and you're losing the moral strategic quadrant. Right. And so they discovered, hey, well, let's do all these other tactics. Let's mix in with the locals. Let's use local operators to take care of business. Let's do things quietly. How is that going to inform the way that you see the role of the United States military moving forward? Are we structured in the right way? Are we thinking strategically the right way? How does your direct personal experience translate into your ideas for the future of the military in the United States?
I think overall, we can always change tactics. We can always come up with new procedures. But the biggest thing I think that the United States military needs from especially its political leadership, is actual clear-cut guidance. Tell us exactly why we are in these places and what do you hope to accomplish. I mean, we went into the global war on terror with the objective that, hey, we just need to go get rid of these Al-Qaeda guys because they attacked us on 9/11. Very clear cut. Anyone can understand that. But shortly thereafter, we deviated into these really ill-defined regime change and then nation building that became counterinsurgency, because nobody could ever really say, hey, this is exactly what we want out of this place, and this is what it needs to look like when you're done. Instead, there was this false narrative, especially in Iraq, that there was these massive, obviously, weapons of mass destruction, but then there was these huge links to Al-Qaeda, and somehow everybody that was affiliated with Saddam's regime was therefore linked to Al-Qaeda. So if we just get rid of these guys from Saddam's regime, we run them down, we smash them, then suddenly we're going to wake up one morning and Jeffersonian democracy is going to flourish and Iraq is going to become Switzerland and they're going to sell us oil and it's going to be great. And I don't think anybody ever really believed that. But because that narrative had been sold and it was so persuasive between the political class and the media, the military's left there like, okay, well, what do you guys want me to do now? I mean, I guess we'll just do what the military does really well because everybody's here. We invaded this country with a conventional military. Let's go ply our trade. Let's go hunt down everybody in the Ba'ath Party. And if there's a town that's giving these people support, never mind the fact that we just totally threw them out of the government and said they could never have jobs anymore. Let's not address that because that interferes with the political narrative. Let's just go smash that entire town. So, I mean, I love talking military tactics. I could talk them all day. There's so many little lessons we learned throughout the war on terror, especially when you start talking about using intelligence and doing, I'd say, more low visibility operations. But the biggest failures we had in the war on terror are really from the political class, and I think a lot of that goes down to the political class was never held accountable because the American people just sort of lost interest really quick with it because there's no draft. The military and the war didn't really affect people that much, but our political class and both sides of the aisle, all commanders in chief, really up until Trump, they were really hesitant to define what they wanted the end state of the mission to look like. They just kind of left us over there and said, well, counterinsurgency is a big deal right now, so go do counterinsurgency. Well, what happens at the end of the insurgency? And why is there an insurgency? We just didn't look at those key issues.
Could it be because there was
day one, and since then,
it was because there's a foreign occupying force. Maybe
maybe
there's an insurgency.
Yeah, or we told everybody in the Ba'ath Party they could never have a job again, and that that really made them mad.
Right. Yes, clearly a failure to have a clearly defined goal especially when the first goal was, maybe not entirely above board, then you're just coming up with goals to justify the fact of why we're there. The pivot towards democracy building, whatever, after the WMD, after the nuclear inspectors had been kicked out by, all the way back to that. I mean, the idea was they were just going in somehow, going to find a way to go in. But what do you
Yes.
think that this experience of the United States military being 2 decades fighting counterinsurgency as an occupying force in a foreign country, is that the hammer that the whole apparatus has right now? And are they looking for new counterinsurgent nails to hammer? This is one of my big concerns, is that the United States police state basically has been trained for 2 decades to root out insurgents in an occupied territory. I think some people would argue that the regime in power today is an occupying force. It's not based on our American values. It's not based on the founding principles. Are they going to use this 2 decades of counterinsurgency experience and all the technology and all this and turn it on Trump supporters, MAGA people, January 6ers? How is this going to play out? This is something I'm very concerned about.
I mean, before January, even though I was shocked by the election, shocked by the way that it went, if you would have asked me that question in December, I would have said, no, I don't really think so, Jack. I think maybe we're being a bit too conspiratorial. It's not that bad. But every single piece of data that we've seen from the Biden administration, the Biden regime, since they've come into office, and really since before that, since January 6th, the way that the narrative was driven about January 6th, that there was this murderous mob inspired by Trump that sacked the Capitol, and then we've just seen that entire narrative crumble. But the initial narrative is obviously the most sticky in people's minds, and so that still exists. And then we're looking at what's going on right now with the loyalty oath being required to hold a security clearance in the military, the extremist stand down that they announced right when Secretary Austin was sworn in. I thought what was very telling was the Special Operations Command diversity officer getting put in place. We've always had diversity officers. That's nothing new, but putting a guy in there who's extremely radical and leaving his social media up. It's the year 2021. You're telling me the guy didn't know to go back and delete his old tweets? Like, come on. They left his old tweets up there where he compares Trump supporters to Nazis. They left them there for a reason, to let us know that they're in charge. And then, I mean, look at the recent appointment of the ATF director. They could have picked any Fed. They could have picked any cop. They picked a guy that was on the ground in Waco. Well, I mean, what kind of message are they sending? And then we're looking at no-fly lists, guys getting put on those, the way they've gone after the people from January 6th, even after it's been proven that the vast majority of the people there didn't act violently at all. The timeline is just completely and totally crumbling. But again, it's right up in our face. So I do fear that all the tools that we have on the shelf that we already paid for, that the taxpayers already paid for, that are part of the security state, that are part of mass surveillance, and that are part of this counterinsurgency mentality, I do agree with you. I do think that we have those tools at our disposal, and there's people that are very motivated on the political side to let the people that are very motivated on the monetary and, hey, now I'm relevant again, that side of the government to go and ply their trade. I mean, that's extremely dangerous, and that's why you just need sober leaders that are going to actually hold these parts of our government, the security apparatus, hold them to task and do an oversight job. That's something that Congress and I think a lot of our elected leaders have just been completely and totally out to lunch on for 2 decades, is their oversight role.
Yeah, I'm very concerned with the language, the framing. The Biden waited longer than any president since Carter, if not further back, to do a joint session address of Congress. And there's speculation as to why he took so long, why he delayed. My speculation, pure speculation, is that they wanted to build up the January 6th case as big as they could before they went and addressed Congress so that they could use that as a way to set the national agenda. And just the other night, I heard Joe Biden say to a joint session of Congress that white supremacy is terrorism, and it is the number one domestic terror threat that we face, and all of the intelligence agencies tell us so. I'm sure it's all the same intelligence agencies that told us that Russia interfered directly in our elections, all those things.